to himself. Now you have to understand who it was that was calling. The Bible says in the first chapter of John that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So what we really see here is the manifested Word, because the Bible says in 1:14, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten, full of grace and truth. So the manifested Word went up on the mountain and began to call men to himself. Same word that called things into existence. The same word that framed the world. The Bible says he went up on a high place and he began to call people out and up. Now this is significant, because many of us who are in modern day Christianity, we understand the concept of being called out. The Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 17. It's very profound, because God is talking about becoming their God and dwelling among them. And he asks a question. He says, what fellowship does the temple of God have with idols? And then around about verse 17, he says, come out from among them. Be separate from them. Many of us who understand the call of God, we heard the word and the Spirit of God while we were in sin, calling us out. Anybody know what I'm talking about? When you were in a place and you knew you needed to stop doing what you were doing, but didn't know how to stop until you heard the voice of God call to you. And it wasn't so much that you just stopped and walked out, but you followed the voice that was calling you out. God was calling you out of a situation. And a great many people understand being called out and separating ourselves. I would say the vast majority of the church understands being called out. We're like Nathaniel, who was called out. We understand being separate from the things we used to do. Yeah, we understand I'm no longer hanging out doing the things that I used to do with the people I used to do it with. I'm not smoking and drinking. I'm not whoremongering. I'm not robbing people. I'm not stealing. I'm not lying and cheating and swindling. I've been called out of that. Even when I try to go back in the midst of that, I'm not comfortable with it, because I've been called. Anybody know what I'm talking about? When you've been called out of it, even when you try to go back in it and visit people, you're not as comfortable as you used to be, because now the nature of God is in you and you've been called out of it. You prefer to be separate from it. When your coworkers and your girlfriends want to go to happy hour and go to the bar, you don't prefer to do that anymore. You've been called out of that. Folk want to sit around and gossip and talk about something that's irrelevant. You're at work and you could sit at the table, but something about sitting there is not comfortable to you anymore. There is a nature in you that's different. You've been called out of that. You separate yourself from things that are not like God. You're called out. In the Bible, it gives us a clear picture of one of the disciples of Christ who understood being called out. But I don't know that he knew what it meant to be called up. I'm going somewhere. Nathaniel, the Bible says, was sitting under the fig tree by himself. See, when you're called out, you start to discover that sometimes it's all right to be alone. You don't need to run with the pack. You don't have to be like everybody else. See, when you understand you've been called out, you stop kissing up to people and sweating everybody and running behind them, because you understand that you've been called out of something. And the stuff that everybody else runs after, you've been called out of it. Like, I'm going to have to preach. I don't have to sweat you and make you try to understand who I am, because my calling is going to identify who I am. My anointing is going to. If I just walk the steps that God orders before me, at some point you know who I am. The distinction of being called is that you don't mind being set apart. So Nathaniel is under the fig tree, set apart, called out of the other stuff that the Israelites were in. And Philip meets Jesus. and runs to get Nathanael. He knew where he was. He said, man, let me go get Nathanael. This is the one he needs to meet right here. So he goes and gets Nathanael. And I like Nathanael. He didn't just run after anything. He questioned him first. He said, hey, man, we have found the one that Moses talked about, that was written about in the law. He is Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathanael, knowing where sin is, he says, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? You're trying to get me to go find the Messiah in Nazareth? Oh, I'm going to preach before it's over. So hold up, Chief. I left Nazareth. I left, Galilee. I left all those places they used to call me in sin. You're telling me I got to go back in there to find the Messiah? Philip challenges him. He says, well, come and see. So Nathanael, who is called out, he gets up and he follows Philip. And as he is walking, he sees Jesus, and from afar, Jesus says, an Israelite indeed. Now, that's a real dude, right? That's a real Christian right there. Now I know some of y'all, that's a real Israelite right there, in whom there is no guile. Guile means deceit. He said, now that's a real Christian coming right there. I'm using the term Christian. I'm supplementing that in. But yeah, that's a real one right there. And in him, there is no guile. He understands being called out. And when Nathanael heard that, he says, how do you know me? He says, know you? Man, before Philip came and got you from under the fig tree, I knew you. He says, surely you are the King of Israel. Surely you are the Son of God. Jesus said, hold up. You believing me because I gave you a revelation of yourself? You believing me because I gave you a greater understanding of you? You believing me because I showed you yourself in your state of being called out? That's why you believe me? Well, my friend, let me help you. I'm not only going to tell you what I saw, I'm going to tell you what I see. That you're excited about what I saw. I'm excited about what I see. You, my friend, are going to see the heavens open. You are going to see angels descending and ascending. You are not just going to be called out. You're going to be called up. There are a great many people who are satisfied with being called out. You're not in sin where you used to be, but you hadn't fully gotten to the place where the Lord wants you to be. You're somewhere in the middle of being called out and called up. Called out is when you have a revelation of God and what he's doing for you. Called up is when you come to know Jesus from a higher perspective. And what the Bible says he was doing that day, he was calling people up to the mountain. Now, some of y'all are listening, and I don't think you're catching it, because what happens with many of us, we're comfortable with being called out. I'm not in sin anymore. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm comfortable. But when you get called up, being called up makes you uncomfortable. Being called up takes you out of your comfort zone. And if you really want to discover who Jesus is, you're going to have to climb. If you're going to find out who Jesus really is, you can't sit there and just be ordinary Christians anymore. You're going to have to make it in your mind to follow the call that he is giving you, and you are going to have to climb. He didn't stay in the city. He went up on the mountain, and the Bible says he called everybody to him.